I keep saying that Baltany is one of my favourite watch brands that is available to purchase on Aliexpress. And I say that for a number of different reasons, but primarily it's because they keep putting out designs of watches that I really like. Designs just like this one. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I do actually have one negative thing to say about Baltany. Well, it's not really a negative, it's a slight annoyance, and the annoyance is that they're putting out so many watches that I like that I'm struggling to choose which ones that I want to put into my own collection. I'm trying to keep my collection to a manageable size, at a size that where I actually wear all my watches, and if I bought all the Baltany watches that I'm seeing released, well, that wouldn't be possible. So I then have to choose amongst their releases which I would actually like to purchase, which I would actually like to put into my collection. And as soon as I saw this release from Baltany, the S4092 crosshairs, well, I knew this one was going to get through that filter. I knew this one was going to end up in my collection, and it certainly directly went to my wish list as a watch that I wanted to purchase for myself. And as I looked on the website and on the AliExpress stores, I could see that it was available in 3 different variations. A silver case with a silver dial, which was definitely the one for me because that's what I like. But there's also a gold case version with a silver dial and a gold case version with a golden dial. I knew that those ones were not going to enter my collection. I'm not really into that yellow gold look, but silver I particularly like. Silver dials, well, they're something that stand out to me. And watches that look like this have this vintage element to them, have this vintage design, have these sort of vintage lugs, and have sub-seconds. Well, they always do stand out to me. And when I knew that it was a Baltany watch, which I knew then would be a quality watch, and I knew there would also be an affordable watch, well, I knew it was going to enter my collection. And when I say affordable, well, I consider this to be affordable at 250 Australian dollars. But before I ended up spending that 250 Australian dollars, I had a store from AliExpress reach out to me and say, would you like to feature one of our watches? And when I went onto their store, I saw that they sold this watch. So I said, could I please have that one? And they said yes. And they sent this watch out to me. That's why you would have seen this sponsored icon up there. It's not sponsored by Baltany, it's sponsored by this specific store on AliExpress. And I'm going to leave an affiliate link to that particular store in the description of this video. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to pick the one that I wanted. This was the one that I wanted, so it was a bit of a win-win for me. When I look at the description of this one online, I'm not sure if they describe the dial as silver. I think they've written white on a number of locations, and it is, well, in my opinion, it is definitely not white. It is definitely silver. In fact, it has an almost sparkly silver look to it. And onto that silver dial is a crosshairs pattern. And you'll see that crosshairs pattern, well, 2 things. Firstly, it goes straight through that Baltany logo under the 12 o'clock. And I know a lot of people are going to point to that thinking, why was that design choice made? Why did they not stop the crosshairs? That doesn't look perfect. And, well, I do partially agree with that. I think Baltany could have stopped that line intersecting with their Baltany logo. But what I think they've actually done is homage some vintage watches where that is exactly what happened on those vintage watches. I think perhaps they over-homaged that particular vintage element, but that's what they've chosen to do. So that crosshairs goes straight through the word Baltany. But what I do like is that it hasn't just finished with one single crosshairs. They've done a secondary smaller crosshairs at that sub-second down there at the 6 o'clock. And that really, well, I quite like that. I think it is a nice visual element on the dial. Plus it also gives you the opportunity when you are looking at that second hand to get an approximation of exactly where that second hand lies within the 60-second time period. And that little sub-second hand is polished steel, just like the main hands, just like those applied markers at the hours. And it is a relatively simple sub-second hand, and I'm finding that seems to be a standard on many watches that have sub-seconds. But what isn't standard is the hour and the minute hand on this watch. In particular, that large, long, interestingly designed minute hand. It sort of curves in at the center, then curves back out again. The hour hand is also rather interesting, perhaps not quite as interesting as that minute hand, and it gives it a very delicate, very dressy look. being polished as well gives it that dressy look, and being silver on silver, well, it does affect the legibility of this watch somewhat, but I don't think you're going to be purchasing or owning this watch or wearing this watch specifically for extreme legibility. This is a dressy vintage style watch. It is a watch that you are going to wear in more dressy environments. Oh, hello there. Just thought I'd interrupt just for a moment just to ask you a big favour. This favour is super easy, costs you absolutely nothing, but makes a big difference to me, and that is, could you please subscribe if you have not done so already? Thank you very much. Now let's get back to this video. And they've definitely gone for that vintage dressy aesthetics of this one. However, it's not vintage sizing, and I'm actually not sure if this was a correct decision or not. I think on paper it is definitely the correct decision. Now, a lot of people are going to like this, that the fact that the case is actually 38.4 millimeters. It's only 10.8 millimeters tall, which I do like. The lug to lug is 46.6. Has a lug width of 20, and it only weighs in at 63.5 grams. But being a case of that size, 38.5, to me on paper, perfect. Love that size. In fact, I'm drawn towards that size. But when I put this one on wrist, although it fits, and certainly with that slight height, it fits nicely onto my 17 centimeter wrist. But I do keep thinking, actually, I think this should have been slightly more vintage size. I think 37 may have been a better choice. And I know a lot of people out there are going to hear that and say, no, 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 I wish it was bigger. I wish it was 40 millimeters, but have a look at it on my wrist. And I think the design, the style, and the look of this one, for me anyway, personally, I probably would have chosen slightly smaller. If I was buying this one, I know I would have chosen the bigger one if there was an option. But now that I have it in hand and on wrist, I think a little bit smaller might have been a better option for this particular model. Something I do like to see from Baltany is the overall quality and design choices that they have made, and that is then further identified by seeing that they have capped the Canon pinion on this one. A lot of affordable watches don't do this, and it is such a small little minor element that for me elevates a watch. And it is nice to see that Baltany are doing this so often, and it's nice to see that it has been capped on this particular watch. And that dial and those hands and that capped Canon pinion are covered by a double domed sapphire crystal. And you may have noticed I didn't show you a lume shot. Well, I think it should be fairly obvious that this watch does not have any lume whatsoever. So there's no point showing you a black screen. But as we look at the double domed sapphire, we'll see that it is mildly domed. It has a very nice aspect and look to it, but it doesn't then take away from just how thin this watch is. But it then also does show you just how thin the rest of this watch is, because it features a movement from Seagull, the ST movement. But there's two choices. You can either choose an automatic version of this movement or a hand winding version of this movement. And when I ordered this watch, well, I wasn't aware that that was an option, because I'm not sure, maybe I would have chosen the hand winding version. Instead, I got the automatic version, but it is still nice and thin, and I guess it is a little bit more easy and everyday to wear if it is automatic. But even though this one is the automatic version, it still also does have hand winding. The crown is not screw down, which I'm pleased about, because I'm assuming the same crown will be used on the hand winding only version of this watch. But when you pull out this crown, you'll see that there is no ghost position, but there is also no hacking on that seconds hand. And the crown itself is set within a fully polished case, which might be a little bit boring in some watches, but it certainly is not boring in this watch, because as you look at the case, you'll see that there are a lot of elements to it. You've obviously got that polished step down solid bezel leading to a very thin case side, which then leads out to these almost sort of attached lugs. Very vintage inspired, and something that I always appreciate, but I don't think I've always seen that thin case profile leading into those larger lugs. But it then does give you an element of this watch is very thin, beyond the fact that it is actually very thin. The tops of the lugs are polished, the sides of the lugs are polished, everything about this watch is polished, and as you turn it around and look at the case back, that is also all polished. There's some details about this watch, of course it being a Baltany watch, having a sapphire crystal and an automatic movement, and that it has 50 meters of water resistance. And it's something that I've learned about Baltany, because I've just owned so many of them now, is that they go beyond just making a good watch. They pair the watch with a really good quality strap. And that's not always done on affordable watches. It's certainly not always done on Aliexpress watches, but they certainly is done by Baltany, because this is a very nice leather strap. It is a little bit stiff and it has taken a little bit to wear in, but it is very well made. It is leather. It is a beautiful color. It is very comfortable. The stitching is done very well, and it leads to a very nicely done buckle and tang. And after having so many positive things to say about this watch, and I do have a lot of positive things to say about this watch because it is a beautifully well-made watch, which I love the look of. But then there is a problem, or at least there's a problem for me, and it has to do with the looks. It's a look or a design of watch which I'm always drawn towards. This sub-second, dressy, vintage style, I'm always drawn towards it, and that's one of the primary reasons why I was drawn to this specific watch. But what I've learned in the past, and what has come through with this watch as well, is the fact that I don't really wear them. I look at it and I think that's pretty, that's lovely, but then I don't end up picking it up and wearing it much. And unfortunately, that's what's happened with this Baltany too. As much as I like it, as much as I think it's pretty, as much as I think it is well made, as much as I think it is affordable, as much as I like the strap, as much as I think that it fits me, albeit I wouldn't mind it being slightly smaller, it's not a watch that I've ended up wearing a lot, which means I am probably going to end up having it leave my collection. But I'm still very glad that I had the opportunity to own this one and also share it with you guys. And, well, I could share with you a few other thoughts about some other watches if you want to click on these videos next.